Welcome to the Reporter Podcast with Bo Berman.
Hey everybody, I'm Bo Berman and this is Reporter, the podcast that delves into the minds and lives of broadcast news reporters and anchors, delivering a behind-the-scenes look at their careers, their methods, best practices, and some personal stories from the trenches of journalism. And today, a very special guest, somebody who is not only a on-air investigative reporter for many, many years, but also someone who has done a very unique thing. He has been able to take a story that he did for on-air purposes and turn it into a published book. So I know that I've aspired to do this at one point, or at least had the hubris to think that it's something I could do. I'm not sure if it is, but I would not doubt if many of us, based on the stories we cover, would be interested in writing a book about our stories. So without further ado, Brian Kuebler, welcome to the show.
Hey, Bo, how you doing, man?
Good. I hope I didn't butcher your last name.
No, you're good. I mean, no more than my anchors do, so you're fine.
Kuebler, Brian Kuebler.
Yeah.
So, Brian, you work for the Scripps TV station in Baltimore, Maryland, WMAR. And how long have you been there?
I've been there a little over 11 years now.
11 years. Okay. Yeah. So we just, for in case the audience is curious, how the hell you ended up here, or how I ended up here, how anything ended up anywhere. We met about 7 years ago in Boston at one of the IRE conferences. And if you're one of the select people who's listened to every episode of this podcast, you'll see that that's a common theme. A lot of my recruitment for the podcast is IRE veterans like yourself, Brian. But yeah, so we met at my first IRE conference, which was in Boston, Massachusetts, and had a good time up there. A lot of learning. A few drinks are always had at those conferences.
Yeah, it could be a mess. Yeah.
And by a few, I mean 3, just literally 3 the whole weekend, 1 per night.
Right. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's all. The rest is all
Usually
learning.
you're hard at work in all the seminars and your best behavior.
Absolutely. That's what you have to do.
Yeah.
No, I mean, actually it's funny because, some stations, if you're lucky, will pay for you to go to that conference. If you're lucky, I mean, they will pay your room, your board, your conference fee, which it's like $200 or something like that. It's probably going to go up to $500 or something crazy. And with inflation, and then other stations, they're just like, yeah, no, that's okay. You're not really allowed to go. Oh, okay. You really want to go? All right. Use vacation days and pay for it yourself. And I've been on both sides of that coin. I definitely prefer to be on the side where they pay for it, but yeah, I mean,
yeah, you've heard like the stories about like some people show up, they do it on their own dime, they do it on their own vacation time, and then you're right. There are other organizations that invest in their people and send them there. I'm fortunate enough to be the latter. I mean, Scripps has a big Scripps Day there every year, and so they usually send teams or a couple of reporters from every station to go there. I have not been in the last couple of years for various different scheduling incidents, but yeah, no, I've been to a fair amount of them. So yeah, I think it's cool when a station sends their investigative reporter. I mean, we even sent our photographers there one year.
Yeah.
For a couple of years.
Yeah.
Because I think you get a lot out of it,
Yeah, it's a great program, a great organization. And I think it's a testament to it that there are people who fork out hundreds of dollars out of pocket, use vacation time. And I've been one of those people because it's that valuable, to go to a learning seminar. That does not seem like that would add up, but it's that good. I mean, the first time I went to, it like changed my life. I mean, I literally drove away from that conference thinking my life has literally changed. I felt like I kind of, it's used as a cliche, but I kind of felt like I found my tribe a little bit. Like people just thought the same way as me in a good way. Like they had the same sense of humor, like very cool experience.
Yeah, no, it's great. It could be too tribal sometimes, I think.
Yeah,
sometimes
it's true.
I like to step away from it and do some. I like to take. I've been a bunch of years. Obviously, I've seen you there a bunch of times, but there are a couple of years where, like, one year it was during like I got married, and so like I wasn't going to go. And then another odd year, I decided to just take a year off because I like to space it out. But no, it's every time you go, I usually come back with a nice kind of nugget of information that I work out throughout the rest of the year. You know, it's a good place to get kind of dip in and out of. You know.
Yeah. Excuse that weird noise in the background. My Pomeranian is coughing his lungs out.
Coughing up something? Yeah.
Yeah, he's actually he's like not terminally sick, but like he's like long-term sick. He's about to turn 13 and he's just struggling with all these health issues, but he's hanging on. So,
oh, man.
But he has this little cough that comes out, sounds like a gremlin. But anyway, yeah, no, it's a great conference. Yeah, and I mean, I think life-changing for some people, at least for me, which is not even being overly dramatic. But so what you stopped going to it because you kind of feel like you've learned everything, or that you're like,
no. I just haven't been. I think I didn't go last year for a scheduling conflict or something like that. But
yeah,
no, I attempt to go at least once every other year.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. I actually haven't gone the last like 3 or 4 years either. And not because I don't love it, but it's same thing as you, just, you know, life events and family stuff. And also I guess my station wouldn't pay for it. So that factored in, but yeah, but I miss it. Yeah. So you've been at WMAR for 11 years. Where did you grew up in, is it Long Island or New Jersey or something like that?
You got it. Long Island. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a Long Island kid. Yeah.
Long Island. And you went to high school there, and did you go to college?
I went to college in University of Maryland, College Park, and so I was down here for college. And then I got my first job. I was bartending after college, and then I finally put a resume tape together and finally got a job after a few months out of college at Twin Falls, Idaho. Is where I first landed my first gig. The high desert of Idaho. And then I spent a year there, and then I came back. I decided to go to grad school, and then went to.
Is that worth it?
Went back. Well, I met my mentor on. Do you remember a chat like back when chat rooms were like a thing? Like the site called Media Line, where like a lot of us would get on and talk about the business and all that kind of stuff.
No, that one outdates me because I was like probably a little bit, you know, I was probably like a freshman in high school at that point. So I was focused. I lived on a shoe message board called Nike Talk. I was like a shoe freak.
But I mean, like I met who ended up becoming my mentor in the business, and he was a big Mizzou guy, and he's like, you need to go to Mizzou. He's like, yeah, I sent him a tape, and he's like, hey, your stuff looks great. Well, no, he's like, your stuff looks terrible, but I could see that you have a lot of like talent and promise. So I want you to go to the University of Missouri for grad school. And I was like, I don't want to go to grad school. But eventually I said, you know what, fine. So I left the job there and went to grad school in the middle of Missouri for 2 years. But because I had a year of experience, I kind of didn't have to take a lot of like those intro classes or whatever. And the one thing about Missouri that makes it the #1 journalism school in the country for TV is that they own their commercial NBC affiliate KOMU there. So like your lab work is done on a commercial television, not like a university like sub channel or something.
Right.
So like you're literally working for a commercial television station. And because I had a year experience, I went right into that. So I kind of consider it working through grad school because I did, you know, I went straight out to the station and started working.
Right.
And then I did my grad degree there for 2 years. And then after I got done with that, I got a job in Memphis, Tennessee, at WREG down there, the CBS affiliate. And I stayed down there for about 6 years, loved that city, but there's only so long a northerner can stay down in the South. So then I got the news director at the competition in Memphis that I was working against pretty much my entire time down there, became the news director at WMAR-TV in Baltimore. And she immediately called me and she was like, I need someone like you up here. And I was like, hey, I went to school up there. I've been trying to get back to DC, Baltimore my entire career because I loved the area here when I was in school. And so she hired me, and the rest is history.
Wow. So it sounds like you do put a pretty good value on the Missouri experience.
Yeah, I do. It's a master's degree, so I learned a lot of theory and like I really deep dive kind of like eggheady journalism stuff. But like for me, it was, I enjoyed it. I had to write a thesis, and I learned how to. My whole thesis was on narrative journalism and how I think it's important, regardless of, because I think back then when I was doing it, narrative journalism was mostly, people recognized that as mostly features. And my whole career there and in my thesis was to apply that to hard news. So like a hard news narrative style. And it was all like, in lab work and stuff like that, and like trying to prove it in my thesis and whatever. And then I went to Memphis, and, it's a, big time crime city, and it's constantly hard news. And I was working for a hard news director. And so, when I wanted to do features, she's like, no. And she like throw me out on murders and like, fires and court cases and all this stuff. And like, I didn't know that I wanted to be that reporter until my news director forced me to cover a lot of that stuff as a young reporter. And so I applied this narrative style that I was studying and that I wanted to be. And I kind of mixed the two. And that's basically how I would describe my style as a reporter, as an investigative reporter today, is like a hard news narrative style. And I learned a lot from Wayne Friedman, who you may or may not know, and maybe some listeners do, big time Emmy award-winning reporter out in San Francisco, who's been recognized for his writing like 52 times with Emmys and Murrows and all this kind of stuff. He used to do seminars at all the big journalism conferences and stuff. And so I learned a lot from him and his writing style and the idea of a universal truth in all the stories that we tell. And if you don't make them relatable, no one cares. So every time that I'm out on a story, whether it's a general assignment turn or an investigative piece, I'm usually looking for that kind of like universal truth, that narrative hook that's going to make people care about a story. And so that's how I've always approached everything that I've written, regardless if it's investigative or just a hard news general assignment turn.
Yeah, that's so good that you do that. I mean, I think my personal belief is I do think a lot of times reporters lose sight of that like universal truth concept, or, put simply, why do I care? Like, why would the bulk of people care about this particular shooting or this particular fire or whatever? And, and sometimes it's challenging. I mean, sometimes you're kind of like, they kind of don't care, but like you have to come up with something. And, whether it's just connecting to the emotion or, something they can relate to. But I think reporters like get into this mode of like just banging out scripts and, especially general assignment reporters. And it's like, yeah, it can be a dangerous game, because the more you do it, you kind of forget about that concept of like, yeah, but wait a minute, let's take 10 steps backwards here. Like, you might want to leave out this one fact, but inject this extra piece of emotion, and people will remember that story a lot longer sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard. You can't do it with every story. I mean, like, I'm a crime reporter, right? I'm a crime investigative guy. And so like, I'm covering crime every day. Today I covered crime. I covered crime today, yesterday, the day before. And, I'm not sure if you've heard though, but Baltimore has a little bit of a crime problem. So like, it gets a bit repetitive, and, sometimes you get jaded, and sometimes the story just isn't there because a lot of people don't want to go on camera or they don't talk. But, I usually try to find a thread or a piece or something, and I try to really write it up so that people understand that this is not just, your standard script. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. I mean, it's also very obvious if you're trying to force it too. You got to know. And that's, being in the business as long as I've been now, I kind of know when I can do that and when I can't. So yeah, it's just a matter of what elements you're gathering, what you're able to put on tape at the end of the day,
Yeah, absolutely. So reporting in Baltimore, you cover a lot of crime. You're an investigative reporter. This is kind of like a trite question, but I think I've even asked you this in person, but for the listeners out there, a lot of people have said that the HBO television show The Wire is like one of the greatest crime dramas of all time. What is it? David Simon created it.
Yeah.
Are you into it? Are you into it, or do you love it?
The Wire or the City?
The Wire.
The Wire. Okay, so I have a story about this. So like I watched The Wire as it aired on HBO back in whenever it aired, in the early mid-2000s, right? And I was like, this show is incredible. And I lived in Memphis. I was a reporter in Memphis at the time. So I was like, this show is incredible. And then I got the job here. And then I worked for 2 years here. And then I watched it again, right? I just kind of binged it. And I was like, yeah, this is still great. And wow, this is exactly what Baltimore is. And by that time, I had known the players. I had covered big trials. I had covered big crimes. And like, I can tell the characters that David Simon was talking about were real life characters, you know, like the mayor was the governor now. And like the city council president was the mayor now. And like all this stuff, I was like, oh, it all makes sense. And so then I fast forward to now, and I'm watching it now for the third time, and it's a completely different experience. It's brilliant on a lot of levels, and it gets this city on a lot of levels that, like, as I kind of get more experienced in reporting in this town, I experience it on different levels. It really is an incredible piece of work.
Yeah, I mean, it's critically acclaimed. I wasn't sure that answer was going to go that way. I thought you were going to say that, you know, when you watch it the second time, it didn't hold up. So that's interesting to hear.
No, it holds up. It holds up even better every time that you watch it, because you have a different set of like experiences behind it. You know,
right.
Now I'm like a veteran investigative guy in this town. Like, I've seen how the police department works. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
I've seen how, yeah.
I mean, if they did a reboot of it, you could practically be a character in it theoretically. I mean,
it's funny you mention that. So like we had a really bad murder here 2 years ago. We had a homicide cop that was killed, right? You know, cops tragically are, you know, this happens quite a bit, right? But homicide detectives are never usually killed in the job. You know, they're plainclothes guys that are investigating. They're not like frontline patrolmen. So that was weird in and of itself. And that story kind of evolved because they never found anyone who did it. And then there's this theory that it might be suicide. And it's been like kind of holding this city hostage for a couple of years. And so HBO is starting to come around and do a documentary on that case, and a wildly like corrupt ring of officers called the Gun Trace Task Force, which, you know, was a big, huge story last year too. So HBO was kind of doing a big documentary on it, and they ended up following, you know, they've been all the press conferences, and then through all of that, they ended up following me quite a bit. And a print reporter in town as well. And the executive producer of the documentary is a character on The Wire. She was a character on The Wire, and now she's producing documentaries.
Oh wow!
I sat down for, like, you know, they follow you around. They've been following me around for like 8 months, 9 months now. But then you have like your formal interview where you sit and talk to them for like 3 hours, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know when that's gonna air. I know they're kind of toward the end of their production now. And I don't know when that's going to hit HBO, but, I should be part of it, as I'm told. So that's kind of interesting. And it's, you know, produced by one of the actors that was in The Wire. So, you know, it's art imitates life, whatever that saying is, right? Or something like that.
Right.
So that should be fun. We'll see how
do you know what it's going to be called?
No, I have no idea. I know that they're like looking at dailies now and kind of figuring out how they're gonna. I think it's still a year or so away. I don't think they have I don't know that they have a working title for it. But this particular Sonia Sohn is the producer. She was Detective Greggs on The Wire. But she also did a documentary, I think 2 years ago, called Baltimore Rising, I think it was called, which was critically acclaimed on HBO, and that was about the riots in 2015 and the interplay between the police department and the community and all that kind of stuff.
Wow. I guess it won't be called just like The Wire 2. That wouldn't make sense.
No, I don't think so.
They're just incredibly lazy. Yeah, that's very cool. Was your station okay with that? Like, did you have to get clearance for that, or did they balk at that at all?
I did. I asked them, I said, you know, listen, this documentary crew wants to follow me around. And I said, I'm not doing anything that I normally wouldn't do as a reporter. They're just kind of like documenting it. And I kind of kept them abreast of the whole situation. I didn't like, they wanted to come in the station and see me work and everything. I avoided that because I don't want to disrupt my newsroom with that kind of stuff, But no, I mean, they seem to be totally cool with it.
Good. Yeah. I mean, I've had some stations that just were really tight about that kind of thing. And would not go for it, but that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you've been at WMAR, like we've said a couple times here, 11 years since you left Memphis, and that's kind of it's always what's the word? There's a term for this, like a stripe on your badge, or there's a term for it, like a positive thing whenever an opposing, like a competition news director plucks you, and picks you and wants you to be on their team. Yeah, I've always viewed that as like kind of cool, actually, that theoretically there's this tough competition, and like I always have this mindset of like, oh, they must hate me. And it's like, no, they probably just respect your game, your skills, if you're good enough. They just hate that you're not on their team, really. So that's kind of cool that that's what happened and got you from Memphis to Baltimore. And so you've been in Baltimore a long time now, quite a while. And what's really exciting in your life the last couple of years is the book. So Brian has authored a new book called The Long Blink, and it's based on a story that you covered, right?
Yeah, I was assigned this story back in 2010, so 9 years ago now. It wasn't. It's funny. I almost didn't tell the story. Like we had a really horrible truck crash where the tractor trailer driver fell asleep in the wheel and just barreled into this family, killed the wife and critically injured the two boys. The wife was a wildly popular professor here at a Baltimore area university, so it was a huge story around here. The accident happened as they were driving back to Baltimore from Ohio, so it happened in Ohio, but it was this huge popular story around here because the whole community was pouring out to support these folks. The husband wasn't in the car that day, so he was back here working. So he wakes up to this like whole new reality of what just happened. And my news director called me in the office, and she's like, he knows someone here at the station. He wants to tell the story. And I was like, at that point, I was 2 years into my contract here, so I was like, I originally was like, I don't know if I'm the right guy for it. I was like, I was trying to establish myself as like a crime and grime, courts and fire kind of like investigative reportery type guy, And this was surely an important story, but not really, my lane, so to speak. And she said, I don't really have to care what you think, do the story. So I called this father and widower up, and we talked on the phone, and I instantly realized this man there was more than just a story here, and so I followed this family story over a couple of years. I won my first Emmy telling the story. I won my first Edward R. Murrow Award telling this family story. And so I knew it was a very popular story. And every time I did something, and put it on the web, it went crazy. People were drawn to the emotional impact of what happened. And so after a few years, he asked me to write a book. And I said, I think you're freaking crazy. There is no way I can write a book. I said, the longest thing I ever wrote was like an 8-minute on-air piece about a serial killer. I was like, I don't know that I can do a book. And so I kind of put him off. And finally, I kind of thought about it. I said, what if I think about this as like, if I take all the chapters and I outline them, right? And I treat each chapter like an in-depth, long form piece, like I do on TV, that if I bite it off like that, then I can do that, And so I outlined it all, and I kind of realized what the interviews I would need and who I'd need to talk to and where I need to travel to get the information, all this kind of stuff. And so that's how I did it. And it took me about 3 years to write, and kind of followed this story arc from like this horrible crash to like to the ending, which is, I don't want to give it away because it's kind of like, it's explosive and emotional, but I like the reader to kind of get there organically. I don't really want to give much away, but It's really it's an ending you'll never see coming, but it's an incredibly emotional story. And at the end of it, the elevator pitch that I tell people it's about is it's basically surviving trauma. It's about like raising two children that will never be the same, losing the love of your life. And it's about trying to find a purpose and then ultimately forgiveness in that trauma in order to piece together, what's left of your old life in order to help move your family into a new life. And that's the kind of story arc that I told it in, because I think, as you know, Bo, the amount of victims that we speak to in violent crimes or crashes or whatever throughout our career, there are just some people. There are some people that just kind of like wear it and can pivot into something so much bigger and more meaningful than just than what it can be. I mean, I don't know that I have the strength to do that kind of stuff, but like I would have curled up in a ball and hated the world for the rest of my life if I had lost my wife and my child was maimed and handicapped the rest of his life because some guy fell asleep at the wheel. You know what I mean? Like I would be bitter about it.
Right.
But this guy became an advocate. He is on Capitol Hill every year lobbying Congress to help with trucking regulations to make the roads safer. He's become this incredible champion of his disabled son, and he's started all these nonprofits to like help people with disabilities kind of maneuver through life, and
wow.
And it's just he's just this incredible guy that turned this horrible thing into this like tapestry to honor his dead wife and to like champion his son. And it's when you meet this man, you're just like, Jesus, I don't know how you did this, but like, so ultimately that's kind of what made me want to write about him. And yeah, it took a few years to get done, but it just got published, just was released in September. So I hope people enjoy it. I hope people kind of get out of it at least half of what I was able to put into it. And I hope I did a good job in telling this man's story, because I think it's an important issue, but it's also an important kind of like every man's story as well.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. It just showed up at my house a day or two ago, and I'm really looking forward to diving into it. It sounds really deep and fantastic. So let's talk about this a little bit more. Let's dive into it deeper. I'm very, very fascinated by this. Like I said, kind of in that awkward intro, I think a lot of reporters have probably considered themselves like, oh, I should write a book about this story that they've done, or someone's told them, hey, you should write a book about this. And, probably all of us consider ourselves like good writers, or at least better at writing than at math usually. But then again,
right.
But then again, writing a, minute 15 package script is, very different than writing a 315 page book. So I know you talked about how that was daunting at first, and then you kind of did a good job of describing how you created a mental model that helped you suss that out and, build the confidence to do it. But, in brief, I'm going to ask you a number of questions here. So first of all, like you were writing this while you were still working a full-time job that's a pretty stressful one, crime/investigative reporter in Baltimore, Maryland. So how did you find the time? Like, were you doing this in the mornings, the nights, or when?
So I had a very strict routine. Like I wouldn't write during the week because for me, and I don't know if others are like this too, but like I feel like I have a finite amount of creativity in every day, and like if I blow through that, then I just don't want to. I can't come home and create more,
Yeah.
So like what I would do after my week was done on a Friday, I would come home and I would go to the gym and I'd kind of like work out the stress of the week and kind of mentally reset, right? And then I would come home and then I would go down to my office and I'd pour myself a glass of whiskey. My dog would be there at my feet, and then that's when I would bang it out. And I would write for hours for like, some nights I had it, some nights I was killing it, and I would write for 4 or 5 hours, and then some nights I was like, I was forcing it. So I would quit like after 2 hours, but that's kind of what
What's the latest you would stay up doing that, that you can remember?
Oh, like 2, 3, something like that. I'm a night owl. I'm not a morning person. I can stay up till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. It is not a problem for me.
Yeah.
If I don't get up and do anything.
I'm the same way, for better or worse. I was just curious if you were going to say like, 7 a.m., that type of thing. Feeling the flow.
Like that.
Yeah.
No, like that's a longer thing. Because after a while, you got to just kind of get up. You know what I mean? You got to get up and relax.
Sure.
But
let me ask you really quickly. Sorry, I keep cutting you off. I apologize. But I'm just so curious about all this. You not to get too personal, but I mean, I think you like recently got married, right?
I did in 3 years, 3.5 years.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So semi recently, but I mean, what did your girlfriend, wife, were you seeing her on these Friday nights or no? I mean, because it sounds like
I know it's funny because we started dating right when I had agreed to do this.
Wow.
And that's when we first started dating. So it's like beginning of 2014, I think. 2013, I don't remember. And so I told her, I said, listen, I'm going to endeavor this thing, which means I need my Friday nights. And so we can't see each other on Friday nights. And she was like, okay. She goes, that's cool. That's awesome. I don't care. And I was like, cool. And
Nice.
that was it, and so she left me alone on Friday nights or I had my Friday nights to myself. And, that's when I would do most of my writing. I mean, there were some times where I had to I had to use the entire weekend to get something done because I was up against a deadline or something. But she was remarkably understanding about it. And honestly, as we grew to become, fiance and then married, there were several times along the way where I was like, I can't do this. This is ridiculous. Why am I wasting my time on this? I'm never going to get published. And there's no way this is going to happen for me. And she was a rock the entire time. And she believed in the project and she believed in my writing and she believed in everything else. And I credit her a lot in a lot of the dedications and the acknowledgments in the book, because without her, it absolutely would not have happened.
Wow.
So she's been super supportive about the whole thing throughout the process.
Yeah, that's amazing. So the bulk of the writing though happened on those Friday nights, so really one night a week.
Yeah, usually I would.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there were some times where I had to take off work and go. I got to travel to Kansas City. I had to travel around a little bit for it and do some research. I did a significant amount of interviews with the main character who lives in Baltimore, so that wasn't a big deal. But there were several times where I'd sit there and it's his story, so I had to really grill him for a couple of hours on a couple of nights, to get the details out, and recorded all the interviews and took notes. And
so you interviewed him in person every time?
Every time. So like I said, I kind of sketched out each chapter and what I would need for each chapter, and I would go back to him at the beginning of each chapter, and I would do a fresh interview with him about that time period.
Oh wow!
And yeah, that's how I thought. I mean, I was trying to mimic as closely as I could our daily routine, so that so I felt comfortable doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then everything else kind of came off of that. So I think I had to travel to Kansas City once to go to his attorney's office to go through the case file, which was 3 or 4 legal boxes full of stuff. Locked myself in his conference room for 2 days and took a ton of notes. We ended up interviewing the driver, which is a complicated and incredible story that I'll tell you after you read it. Yeah. But we had traveled for that.
So when you say we, does that mean that your wife came with you, or your editor?
No. My the main. So the teaser is that as we were writing this story, I realized I said to Ed, the main character, I said, I'm not going to write a prescriptive nonfiction book about the trucking industry. I don't want that. People need to know that how you survived all this and what you did. So he agreed to that. So we were telling the story along the way as a story arc. But I always knew from the beginning, he told me, he's like, I want the side of the story from the trucker too. And I said, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, we would obviously try to get that done. I didn't know that I didn't know we were going to be able to do that, because he was in prison for a little bit because of this. And then he got out, and I was like, well, we need to make sure this guy talks to us because he's part of the story. It's journalistically, and not just to get that side, but it's also something that I think that he needed for some sort of closure,
Mm-hmm.
And so we travel, and they both agreed to do the interview, and they agreed that I would be there to broker it. And so we went out there to his house, and we sat there, and I brokered the interview between these two men. And
so he actually interviewed the man that essentially killed his wife.
Yes, I did. I interviewed him on behalf of the main character, but he was standing there as I did it.
So by broker, okay. So you did conduct the interview, though. Okay.
I did. Oh yeah, I had my laptop, had my microphone up. We all knew what we were doing. And
what kind of?
So I did.
Go ahead.
No, it's just so I could tell you unequivocally, Bo, that we've done. How many how many interviews have you done in your career, right? You can't even count them, like thousands, right?
Yeah, over 2,000. Yeah.
Right. There are big ones like that you prepare for, and then there's your everyday kind of like, hey, what happened here? Did you see this? Did you see that?
Right.
All that kind of bullshit. So like this was unequivocally the most like emotional, stressful, like mind-blowing. I've run out of adjectives to describe how this interview went. But it's all laid out at the end of that book, and it's an explosive kind of twist that I don't think readers see coming. But I don't want to say too much more about it because I think it's for the reader. I think they need to organically experience it for themselves.
Yeah.
But
no, let's not have any spoilers on the podcast.
No. That's my big tease. There you go.
Yeah.
So read it. You can buy it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So people can go on Amazon and get, where do you want them to get it from? Does it matter? Or, is there a place that's better?
It doesn't published. The publishing, it doesn't make a difference whether you get it in the store or online. There are plenty of stores carrying it on shelves. But the easiest way for most people, I guess, is Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com, and it's on both of those.
Yeah.
Books A Million, Target. I think you can get it anywhere.
Okay. So are you going to be like rich now?
No, that's a big misnomer. You don't really make any money off books. You have to be like Stephen King to make money off books,
Yeah.
I think you have to write. You have to have a lot of books. You have to get big advances and that kind of stuff, and that doesn't happen for a reporter on their first time out. But
yeah,
who knows? Maybe the second or third. We don't know.
So you do have plans for more?
Well, like I was saying, like you were kind of talking about earlier, it's like there's this thing, right? Was if you're a reporter, and I think for the true writers among us anyway, that like there are like 5 or 6 like what I call back pocket stories, right? That through your career that you've covered, that you go, man, this will make a great freaking book one day, right? If I ever had the tenacity to sit down and write one, or knew about the publishing industry enough to do it, or get lucky enough to get a real book deal, like this would be a great story, right? I've had those stories in my career. I have like 5 of them that I think would make a great book.
Yeah.
This one was not one that I saw coming, but it was the one that presented itself at the time. Mm-hmm. And so now that I was able to do it, and that, I was able to go through the whole publishing process and the literary agency process, and there's so much stuff that I had to learn about this industry that's not our industry that, I really had to become a student of. And so it took a while to get the book contract, but I finally got it from, a legit publisher, and then all this stuff kind of starts happening, and now it's out. So I'm like, okay, I've done this once. Now, what if I go back to do one of those other stories that I thought might make a great book?
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Well, sometimes, I think sometimes in life, like 80% or if not 90% of the battle is just like learning the rules of the game. And then once you know it, you can play it infinitely. But there's sometimes a really uphill battle to learning the rules, such that many people decide just not to learn them.
And publishing is it's a completely different industry. It doesn't work at all like what our industry does. And our industry works weirdly too, but like, it was a complete and utter education for me to go through that process. And because I had to start from scratch, I didn't know anything about it. I researched, I read a ton,
Yeah.
It was a full-time job in addition to my full-time job,
So let's dive into that a little bit and try to keep it as brief as possible, because I'm sure you could talk about this. You could probably give an hours long talk just about the publishing process. But so what I want to do is kind of like talk in order of the cliff notes, very short cliff notes of like a minute on each topic of the process. Okay. So I would start with number one is when from my perspective, whenever you kind of agreed with the main character that you would write the book. So what I'm curious is like, what is the next thing you did? Is it that you started writing chapters, like working on a manuscript, or did you write an outline first and then start looking for a literary agent?
I wrote an outline first, and then I immediately started writing a manuscript. Now, quick side note, for nonfiction, generally speaking, you write a proposal, which is like a 60-page document, right? Of like all this stuff, like what's the book about? Obviously, a synopsis. You have to have like a sales pitch, and you have to tell them what your platform is and who you are and why you can write the book. And then you write like at least you include the first chapter, and then you send that out to a bunch of literary agents, and they go, "Hey, I love this idea. I'm going to represent you on this," and then they clean up your proposal, and then they send it out to a bunch of publishing houses in New York or wherever, and then they get a big publisher to say, "Great, I love this book." They purchase the contract, and then you write for the next wherever long their deadlines are, and then that's your nonfiction book.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I thought was the process. So it was yours. Yeah, so I thought fiction. My understanding was that fiction, you have to present a manuscript first.
Correct.
In nonfiction, you don't. You do the proposal, and then they kind of give you an advance, and then you write it and hope that
That's generally how it works. But
your book is nonfiction.
In my research,
is your book
fiction
or
nonfiction? It's narrative.
Okay.
It's narrative nonfiction. So, like in my research, when I was looking up all that stuff, I read somewhere that it was better for a debut author to have the manuscript written first.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, I'll do that. That is not generally the rule. I did it backwards, but I'm glad that I did it backwards because I needed to know that I could write a manuscript before I get a contract to tell me to write a manuscript, right? I didn't know anything about it.
Okay.
So I wanted to write it first. So that made more sense to me. Now, my next book out, the next idea I have, I'm going to write a proposal, and hopefully that will get purchased and optioned, and then I will write it from scratch with that editor. But I did it backwards here, but it was good that I did because as being a debut author, the book deal that I ended up getting, the editor wanted the full manuscript before she committed, and so it worked out for me.
Oh, wow.
But
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, okay. So you wrote, you came to this tough decision. Okay. You know what? I'm actually going to do this thing, I think. And you start writing the outline, and you broke it down and thought, okay, I'll treat it like I'm just doing a series of news packages, in-depth pieces, and string them together and weave them together. And you started working on the manuscript because you thought that would help to do that first. And you're doing these Friday nights and, tons of research and travel and interviewing this man over and over and drinking whiskey on Friday nights.
Lots of whiskey, yeah.
So how long did it take you until, from the day that you wrote the first words on the page of the actual manuscript to the day that you, closed your eyes and went to bed that night and thought, God damn it, I'm done, or thank God I'm done?
First draft, the end of first draft. Is that what you're talking?
Yeah, the first draft, yeah.
Or soup to nuts, like, hey, it got bought and...
No, the end of the first draft, like, okay, I've written the manuscript, it needs work.
About 2.5 years, right? 2013. No, 3 years. It took me 3 years.
So during that time, were you already looking for literary agents or no?
No, I didn't look for a literary agent until after the manuscript was done. That's when I started what they say querying agents, where you got to put together a query letter, which is a one-page pitch. You got to research all these. There's a million literary agents in New York and elsewhere, and you got to figure out which one is the best match for your style and your topic. Mm-hmm. So I was looking for people that represented journalists, narrative nonfiction, and that sort of thing. And I created a spreadsheet on my computer, and I would query these these literary agents, and I got a lot of rejections, like most people do. And after a few rejections, I said, okay, maybe I'm querying too early. Then I hired a professional editor to look at my manuscript, and he suggested some big wholesale changes. And he said, I'm onto something here. Just maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that. So I spent another bunch of time tweaking that proposal.
How long did you?
2015 is when I got done with it. And then I think late 2015, I had a professional editor look at it. And so I think about another 6 months. So by mid 2016, I was back out querying agents again.
So was it, how hard was it to have, because you had that manuscript and clearly you thought it was good enough at that point because you were querying agents. So to have this professional editor come in, of your own volition because you hired him or her, but to have them come in and say, you got to kind of switch things around. How difficult was that, if at all?
I was fine with it because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So
Okay.
I was totally fine with it. I had everyone I know read it, and they're like, "Oh, that's great." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't trust it. I don't know what the hell I'm doing here."
Yeah.
And so I had a professional editor look at it, and he said, "Listen, first off, he's like, you have got the chops to write nonfiction. This is a great story." He's like, I would just add this or change this around. And it was developmental editing, which we don't usually get at work, right? We get like basically line editing, right? Like take this out, not this, if that, right? This is like a developmental editing. So this guy looked at it and said, no, I would move this here, move that here. They weren't, terrible changes. It was just like, oh yeah, I get that. That makes a lot of sense.
But it took you 6 months but it took you 6 months to implement them.
Right. Well, he said you should stop the story here and put more about this in there. So I had to go back and there was significant rewriting on my part. But I think what I've read and some of the authors I've spoken to, that there's significant rewriting from draft 1 to draft 2 to draft 3 anyway. So it was just part of the process to kind of smooth the story out. And that happened again when I signed the book deal, and the editor at the publishing house edited me again, and she's like, I hate this chapter, kill it, and let's do this and let's do that. So you're constantly working on the story, but until it finally goes to print.
So how did you find the professional editor?
There's been a lot of websites out there just to research online, and I found a guy that I had been reading his blog for a while. And he said, hey, listen, I'm open to submissions if anyone needs an editor. And so I contacted him, and he was, kind of a name in the business. And so, I felt confident in that. And he helped me tremendously.
Did that cost?
I cannot tell you. It was like a few years ago now. I can't remember. It wasn't a ton of money though.
Yeah.
And he said, I'll get it back to you in 2 months. And I was like, great. And then he got it back to me with track changes on Word and all sorts of cool stuff. And then we had a phone call, and he went over all the changes with me, and he's like, good luck. And I was like, thanks. Yeah.
All right. So you implemented his changes over the next 6 months or whatnot.
Yeah.
And you go back to querying, and what happened? Tell me about the time when you finally got the literary agent who wanted to work with you.
This is a great story. Okay. This is a great story. I'll make it quick, but I don't know if you were there that year. IRE Phoenix is when I got the call. I
skipped that one. Yeah.
It was 2017. Is that what I'm thinking? Or 2015?
Yeah, I missed that one. Yeah. No. 2015 was Philly.
Yeah, so it was 2016. It was Phoenix. So it's June in Phoenix, right? And I know because I had queried a bunch of agents, and I was just kind of that was one of my doubting moments where I'm not, I was kept getting rejections, and the rejections I were getting were love the writing, love the story. I'm not the right person for this right now because of such and such and such and such. So this is a pain in the ass. And so after, so I was in Phoenix, and the first night there, I got an email from an agent saying, hey, send me a few chapters, send me a partial, what they call it, a part of your manuscript. And I was like, oh, this is exciting. So I sent him a couple of chapters, whatever. And then the conference starts, and you're, kind of buzzing around with people and going to seminars, and bing, got another email. And one of the seminars said, I like what I'm reading. Send me the rest of it. And I was like, oh shit. So I sent him the rest of it, and I'm kind of quietly excited, but don't want to get too worked up, and going, continuing in the conference or whatever. And, they keep these things so damn cold in June, these buildings, these conference centers, like you're freezing. Freezing. So I was like, and it's hot in Phoenix. So I was like, I got to go outside and I have to melt down for a little bit. I got to need some heat,
Right.
So I remember like walking outside, and I told nobody. I mean, I have a couple of close friends at IRE that, you hang out with. I think we kind of ran in the same circles, you and I, but like, Rachel DePompa, you should have her on this show. She'd be a good one to have too.
She's been invited.
But
like, she's on the list. Yeah, the queue. She's in the queue.
Love her. She's the only one I told because we go back a ways. And I was like, I think this guy asked me for my full manuscript. I'm like super excited about it. And then so I went outside to kind of heat up a little bit because I was freezing. And then I got the email that said, "Hey, can we talk?" And I was like, "Yeah." He called me right there. Had the call right in the middle of the courtyard there at Phoenix. And he was like, went over the whole thing with me. And he's like, "I think maybe we can do this and maybe we can do that. And if you're open to these suggestions and working with me," he's like, I'd like to offer you representation." And I was like, "This is fucking amazing." This is really amazing. So I was like super excited about it. And, we kind of went back and forth in the days that followed and, asking questions and me interviewing him as much as he was interviewing me, and what his vision for the book was and all that kind of stuff. And I ended up signing with him, and, then we went to work together. And basically after that, he says, "All right, well, let's put together the proposal." And we spent 6 months working on the proposal, and then we went on submission.
Wow. 6 months.
Which is a whole other process.
6 months on proposal, and then submission is to publishing houses, right?
Right. So for the rest of that year, we worked on really, really making the proposal sing. So, I had written a proposal, but I didn't know what I was doing. So he's like, "Okay, this is what we need to write now." And I was like, "Okay, fine, let's write it." So we wrote this really good proposal. And then in January, I guess maybe it was November or December of 2016, he went out and started they call it submission, and they do rounds of it. And first, they do a bunch of different editors at a bunch of different houses that he either knows or she knows, or they have connections with, or they think is the right agent for it, editor. And then, then you got to go through the process again, like reject or let me see more or whatever. And so the submission process is its own kind of nerve-wracking process as well, because now real publishing houses are looking at your work, deciding, do we want to publish this book or not?
Yeah. So let's fast forward to when you got that fateful, what did the agent call you one day and go, "Hey buddy, we got a deal." How did that work?
No, he was an email guy, but yeah.
He goes, "Hi, Brian."
Yeah, basically. And it was very dry too.
Deal.
And I was like, I'm excited about this, man. So yeah, we went through a couple of rounds. We spent most of 2017 out on submission, and a lot of the rejections that I were getting were, again, love the writing, love the story. We just don't think that we could make it this big breakout book. And a lot of the big publishing houses want these surefire, big time books,
Yeah.
And it's a small story. It's not a big giant, story. And I knew that. So, but we got very close on a couple of really good deals, but nothing really transpired until all of a sudden, I think it was Halloween 2018, was it? I don't remember the date. He sends me an email and he's like, we're going to bid. There's 2 different publishing houses that want the rights to the manuscript. And I was like, what the I was like, all this rejection, and I'm like, this is not going to happen. And all of a sudden 2 houses were bidding over the manuscript. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
What happens here, And so long story short, one publisher wanted more of a prescriptive nonfiction. They wanted me to pare back the narrative a little bit. They wanted more more about the trucking industry, and they wanted it to be that kind of story. And then this other publisher was like, love it as is. I think it is a clean manuscript. I love the story. I love how you wrote it. And I was like, well, this is a no-brainer to me. I'm gonna go with the publisher who was true to the story that I wrote. And
was the money the same?
Yeah, the advance was around the same. And so I ended up going with Beller Publications, which is a small press, but like they're pretty solid reputation in producing and publishing books of that kind of caliber. And so we signed the contract in like, I want to say November, about a year ago, and then that process started. After that, where you edit with the editor, and then you have a publication date, and you start kind of moving toward that process.
Wow. It's kind of crazy that like once you sign with them, it still takes another year. Like it is.
It's so freaking slow, and then you don't hear anything for months, and you're like, "What's happening? I don't understand."
Are they backing out? Okay. Are they backing out? Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like, hey, do you have an idea for a cover? And like, yeah, I have an idea for a cover. And then like 2 weeks later, this is your cover. And I'm like, what? Then there's like this drawing, and this artist puts together this cover, and you're like, this is beautiful. I love this cover. And then it's like, okay, your publication date's going to be on September 24th. And you're like, oh, okay.
Great.
All right, I'm going to send you over some edits. Okay, I'll start editing. It's like this. It moves slow, and then it moves really fast, and then it moves slow, and then it moves really fast.
Yeah.
It's a really odd process.
That part of it actually does remind me a little bit of like the TV news industry when you're trying to get a job in the news director. For some reason, all news directors do not like to communicate with you. It's just like this weird cryptic, like, hello. And then they send this really friendly email, and then you're like, yeah. And you write back, and then you don't hear from them for 3 weeks. And it's this crazy thing. And then they're like, actually, can you get on a plane tonight? And you're like, what? Like, you haven't even responded to me, dude. It's been 4 weeks.
I know.
It's so wild, but I don't know what that, to this day, I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's like a power thing or like they're just so scattered, with like busyness that they, I don't know what that is, but it just seems like
trying to thread the needle between like hiring freezes or something, or like, okay, now we can hire you. Like, oh, who knows?
Right.
Right. So crazy.
That's possible. Well, congratulations. I mean, what an effort, and just hearing that process, I'm tired. Cause that sounds
it's a lot,
a shit ton of work. But so you basically started this in 2013?
Soup to nuts. It took about 6 years between the conceptual idea of doing it, and then it being on a bookshelf.
Wow. Yeah.
Which, by the way, does not get old. Like, you go into the Barnes and Nobles, and there it is. And I'm like, that's
so
crazy.
Cool. Yeah. All that work is worth it. And frankly, I mean, the book, like our reporting, may change lives. I mean, it may affect someone, I mean, that's just what an eternal reward, I imagine, that you get from this. It's just.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I really enjoyed telling the story. And I mean, the last couple of months has been kind of a whirlwind, because I was doing the book festival here in Baltimore, getting some reviews in some magazines around here, and doing some book signings. Going out to Ohio in a couple of weeks to go do a huge tour out there, where more events, more signings.
Wow.
Media, I was able to, but the really good thing about it was being in the business, I was able to kind of like cash in some favors. So a lot of my friends would get me on the air, at competing stations and podcasts and stuff like that. And so it's been, doing NPR, doing a bunch of different stuff.
Ooh, wow.
Then you have to hire I hired a publicist who's pushing it really hard into different markets now, and so it's a whole process.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're on at least one big time podcast so far. So
yeah, it's a lot of selling. It's a lot of selling me, and like, I don't know how you are, Bo, because I mean, listen, a lot of us reporters love the promotion part of it. I fucking hate it. I always have. I've never liked it.
Yeah.
I've always I would drop a big piece and walk away and let this piece speak for itself. I never enjoyed POPs. I never liked being in like I never liked really heavy promotion runs on stories and stuff.
Yeah.
I never liked being in it. I always wanted to be story first, not me. Let me correct it. I didn't want to be in the promo. I wanted it to be story first. You know what I mean?
Right.
I was always uncomfortable with like having to be like, hey, this is what I did and blah, 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 or I changed it. That's never been my approach to it.
Mm-hmm.
So like now that's what I have to do. I have to go out and go, have you read my book? Blah, blah, blah. I freaking hate it. I really, really hate it. But I've had to swallow all that because that's what it's about. Like your self-promotion. Like I have an Instagram account, which I never had before, a Facebook author account, which I never had before, all this pushing that I feel like it's all ad nauseum. I'm constantly posting pictures of the book and reviews, and it's a full-time job, man.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot. But very cool that you were able to see this through and get to this point, and definitely like a life altering thing that you decided to do. And the main character of the story, you know, he must be pretty thrilled that you, you know, saw this through and it came to fruition and on basically his advice or his request. You know, have you ever heard of the author or the podcaster, Tim Ferriss?
Yes.
People kind of either hate him or love him, or don't know about him. I err more on the side of loving him. He kind of has some flaws. Like he's a little, he's kind of like he's a character, but I've been, you know, I've liked a lot of his stuff for many, many years. His first book was called, The 4-Hour Work Week, which he is the first to admit sounds like a scam book or something. But, but yeah, he has a podcast that he started around 2011, and it's partially what inspired me to do this one, which follows a similar format. But anyway, the point of bringing him up and pivoting a little bit is just that when he was marketing, I think it was his first book. I forget if someone gave him this idea or if he came up with it, but you know, this was back in 2006 or 2007, so a very, very different, you know, technological and cultural and societal time point than we're in now in 2019. But he went out and, like, in San Francisco and in like New York City, went to Barnes and Noble, like on major corners, like the major Barnes and Noble stores, and bought out his own book, quietly, like kind of secretly. I forget exactly how it was done secretly, but, you know, just kind of quickly, you know, went in and said, hey, you know, do you have this book? Yeah, we have it. How many copies do you have? We have 45, you know, I don't know, or we have, you know, whatever. And he was like, okay, I'll take them all. And it was like some story about like creating some sort of like demand. So then like people would go in and be like, do you have it? And they'd be like, well, we did, but we're literally sold out of it. I don't know. It's some weird story like that, but it always stuck with me. It's kind of like a cheap trick, you know, essentially. So I don't recommend that you do that, but it's
I mean, I could. I mean,
you could. Well, I mean, I bought a copy, so there's one. But I don't think Amazon's
I'm happy. I appreciate the support. I really do.
I don't think Amazon's going to sell out anytime soon. Although I hope they do for your sake.
They did sell out.
Did they really?
Sold out the first day. Yeah,
that is awesome.
We had the library here did a huge event for the launch night, which was great. Ooh. So we had a big speaking series. Yeah, it was
sick.
Awesome.
Wow. So it's all
about knowing. But you know how it is. Like it's all about knowing people in the industry that, you know, like they're like, oh, a local reporter wrote a book is a big deal, you know, and so they're like, so they had a beautiful launch night around us, which coincided with the reopening of this beautiful building that they just restored downtown Baltimore. It's a gorgeous library, and like so we had this really big event, and there was some media around it before, and like I'm sitting there before they were introducing me on the stage and to do the talk, and I was like, I looked at the Amazon page, and it was like there are only 18 left, there are only 10 left, there are only, and then it sold out, and I was like, oh, I don't know how many copies they had, but that's awesome, you know?
Yeah, that is really cool.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I have no idea how it's doing. I don't. You don't really know until you get like royalty checks, and so they say the first kind of check-in is usually 6 months. The publisher will tell you, hey, this is how many units you sold. So I've been trying not to get too high or too low based on whatever metrics that Amazon wants to give me, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's good. You just, you know, just keep your head down and just, you know, hope for the best, and you put in the work. So got to believe in it. And, you know, promotion is important, even though you might hate it, but, you know, it can go a long way. It has one of the same words as the Malcolm Gladwell book, Blink, which is like a bestseller. So if people confuse it for that, it might also...
I hope they do. I hope they do.
The long Blink, what the hell? Oh, wait a minute. It's way better. It's much better. I love it. Probably the case. Yeah, well, I'm very excited to read it. And I encourage, you know, everyone listening to this to go ahead and buy it because, number one, what do you have to lose? Number two, you heard what a cool story. You know, you just got the behind the scenes look at what went into making this book. and also it sounds fantastic. And also, it's very cool, I think, to just support another fellow, local news reporter and media person who put in a ton of work and, kind of followed a dream and did something that I think a lot of us would love to do. Probably few of us have like the courage, time, and effort and gumption to do it, but a lot of us would love to do it.
Well, it's funny because what I would like to say is like that, like when, we met at IRE, I'm sure most of the people you talk to on this podcast, as you were saying earlier, go to IRE, but every year that we went, I always went to the seminar titled, how to make your story into a book. And I would always kind of disappear and go, I'm going to go to that seminar. And I went every year that I've been in IRE, and I credit that seminar for at least proving to myself or proving to me that like, I can do this. Like it gave me kind of the basic working knowledge of how to start thinking that I might be able to do it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so that was developed out of IRE as well, because I know that there's a lot of us walking around that have covered stories that have made an impact on us or a community or something they think could be fleshed out into a book. And I'm here to tell you that it's possible. I didn't know that it was. If you asked me 6 years ago, if you asked me 2 years ago, I would have been like, I've just wasted my time. but like, it's just, it's possible. It's about finding the right story and kind of, the time to be able to devote to it. But it's to me, it's super rewarding. It's as rewarding, if not more, than some of the stories I've been able to tell over the years.
I guess it's also about finding a partner who's willing to not see you on Friday nights.
Yeah. I still hold on to those Friday nights even after we're married, though.
Like
those are my nights.
I'm writing. I'm at the Orioles game, but trust me, I'm writing.
That's right. I'll just let me have my whiskey and the dog, and give me some time.
Keeps you sane, maybe. But no, I mean, a ton of support, obviously, from your wife and I'm sure family and other people as well, friends, and all of that stuff is very important. Well, I kind of want to pick your brain about this offline, outside of the podcast a little bit more, because I honestly have aspired to, who hasn't, but I have also aspired to write a book about a series of stories that I did and have delved into the process a bit. In fact, hired a professional editor to go over the outline.
Oh, good.
So I'm on the road, but I've kind of stalled out a bit on motivation and stuff like that. So this is kind of inspiring, and I hope to try to channel some of this energy and use it for my own project. But but this has been awesome. Very, very cool. This episode is pretty much unlike any of the prior episodes that I've done on this podcast.
Oh man, I was going to do like the rapid fire reportery questions.
Oh, you want to do them?
Ready for
all
you.
All right, yeah. Let's do it. I was gonna bow out of it, but you've.
I could be. But first of all, I would be happy to help you in any way I can in your endeavor into writing the book, because I know if I had someone like that, like working, that was available to me, I would have crushed that resource. So I am here to talk to you about it. Let's move on to these reporter questions you asked, because I'm very excited about them.
Hell yeah, we'll do them. You caught me. I was gonna skip them. I skip them whenever we talk about something else or go along on something. But let's do it. All right. So you've probably already heard a bunch of these, and so I might have to switch it up a bit.
I've heard some. Yeah.
I have to switch it up a bit, but. I remember you being in fairly good shape, pretty good biceps. What's your preferred method of working out?
I just changed that. I went from, I used to just kind of go to the gym or whatever, and just do regular gymmy stuff. But I just changed up and I started a new routine with a new trainer. It's called OPEX, and I think it's in select cities around around the country. There's one here in Baltimore where it's a limited membership kind of situation, and you always have a trainer on the floor who's always kind of like looking after you, and then they design your programs each week. So you have a new program every week, and all maintained to try and get to your goals and stuff like that. So
how do you spell it?
OPEX. It's only in certain cities. It's like this kind of new thing that's kind of catching on. But my trainer is awesome, and when you called tonight and said, "Hey, can you push back to 8:15?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." I'm running late tonight, so it's fine.
Nice.
Yeah, no, that's so usually 3 days a week there, and then when it's warm out, which it is now no longer, I usually run 2-3 times a week with the dog.
Got it. Okay. What is your favorite restaurant in Baltimore? You can only eat at one restaurant the rest of your life in Baltimore, or else you die instantly. Where would you go?
Oh wow, one.
Yeah, just one restaurant.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna have to go. There's a restaurant called Hirsch's, and it's in my neighborhood, and it's got it's Italian and authentic pizzas. It's amazeballs.
Wow. How do you spell it?
Hirsch's, HERSHS apostrophe S.
Apostrophe S?
Yeah, it's if you're ever in Baltimore, I know most people stay on the Inner Harbor and they go to Phillips and all this other chainy stuff around. It's easy, but you got to get into the neighborhoods in the city, and the food is insane.
Nice.
But yeah, that's my favorite place. That's one of my go-to places.
Okay. What is your preferred method of ingesting caffeine?
Coffee and coffee. And if I don't get it, like soon as I'm up, it's you don't want to be around me. It's like the first thing that has to happen.
What do you do? Like a dark roast, hot coffee? Do you put milk in it or no?
Nope, black coffee,
Black.
dark roast.
There was that study that said like people who drink coffee black, it's like a sign of a psychopath.
So it's probably that's accurate.
I know. I drink it.
The reason why I drink black coffee, Bo, is because of my first reporting job. I couldn't afford milk or sugar. And I developed a taste for black coffee, and that is why I drink black coffie today. That's accurate, totally true.
I've never heard anybody say that before, to be honest with you. But that is great. A great reason why you drink it black. I do it for like perceived weight loss reasons, and I don't know. I also just don't really. Like, I don't like milk in it unless there's a lot of sugar, but I don't want to have a lot of sugar in it. So it's kind of this weird thing. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you're drinking good enough coffee, it should be fine black. It's like flavorful enough if you drink like really good coffee. But I don't. I drink like bad coffee, and I also drink it black. But it just, whatever.
But if you drink bad coffee or perceived cheap coffee, like your Folgers or your whatever,
yeah, perceived.
As long as you put if you make it strong enough, it tastes like anything else.
Exactly.
Like Starbucks tastes like a really strong cup of Folgers to me.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And they burn it half the time anyway. I'm a big cold brew guy, but now we're getting to the time of year where I've switched into hot. So,
yeah.
What's your favorite place you've ever traveled?
My wife and I travel quite a bit. She's a big travel person. And when we first met, she goes, "I hope you're okay with doing that." And I was like, "Well, I haven't been anywhere but Cancun, so cool." We have been a lot of places. Like, you traveling, right? Aren't you traveling soon?
Yeah, I'm about to go to the Middle East.
I would say we were in Morocco a couple of years ago. Not my favorite place, but a cool experience nonetheless. I have to go with probably Cape Town, South Africa at this point.
Wow, I'd love to go there.
Loved it. South Africa in general, I was like enamored by. I'm enamored by the entire continent. I'd love to go back because we went to Morocco. We went to Cape Town as part of our honeymoon, but we went to Morocco with some friends a couple of years ago. But like Africa is just like, yeah, I'd love to go back. But so far, Cape Town, I think, wins the day.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good answer. What is a book that has greatly influenced your life, or maybe influenced your life the most besides your own?
That's funny. I like influenced my life like professionally, or just that I really
any way. I mean, I'm probably skewing more personal here, but or is there a book or that you've read the most in your life, like you've read it multiple times, or a book that you've given away the most as a gift? And you can always just say pass too if you don't have a rapid answer.
No, I would say one of the best books I've read recently, and not just because it hasn't impacted me in a way. I read fiction because I need to get lost in fiction. You know what I mean? Like I don't personally, even though I wrote one, I don't usually read nonfiction that much. Okay. Or prescriptive nonfiction, like life hack type stuff. So when I read, it's usually to kind of just get lost in a story. My favorite author is a guy named Jonathan Tropper. He's got like I think 6 or 8 books that I think are amazing. I've read every single one of them. I devoured them. He hasn't written one in a while, but the most recent book that I've been a huge fan of is called, I don't remember the author's name, and it's on the bookshelf, but I can't get to it now, but it's called All That's Said. She's an Irish writer, and it's about this guy that's sitting in an Irish pub, and each chapter is a toast to the person in his life that affected him the most. And it's just this beautifully written book that once I closed it, I was like, what a great book.
Wow.
And I told everyone, like, you have to read this book. It's incredible. But I'm also a sucker for like a male protagonist that has like, that's a reflective male protagonist is like, I'm a sucker for a book like that. So
yeah.
I really got lost in it, and I adored it. It was a great book.
It's called All That's Said.
All That's Said, yeah. I forget the author's name.
All right,
but
Google. We got Google on our side.
Yeah. There you go.
You know, it's funny. I forgot. I just remembered one story that I had to tell about you, and it's that I remember asking you for some reporting advice many years ago, because you had presented a story or something like that you did with the police, like you were doing a police ride along, and I told you that sometimes I felt like I had a difficult time getting the police to trust me or to, invite me on a ride along sometimes, even though I'd done a few, but because they kind of viewed me as like a stiff. I show up in a suit and tie, and I'm like this guy with a microphone, and we just like can't relate. And you were like, well, there's only so much you can do about that. I mean, if you go on a ride along, maybe first of all, don't wear a suit. But you were like, the big thing is this. And I was like on the edge of my seat, and you were like, swear. And I was like, what? And you were like, yeah, just be like, hey man, what the fuck's going on? And I was like, what? And you were like, yeah, like you gotta start swearing more around them. And I was like, seriously? You were like, yeah. I mean, you're like, no, I mean, you were like half kidding. You're like, that's not really going to change things altogether wholesale. But you're like, yeah, I mean, you just have to be more relatable. You just have to be more relatable, and you're both humans. And, he's like, but sometimes, believe it or not, just showing them that you're human and like swearing a little bit in conversation can help. You don't remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that. I don't remember saying that, but I remember that conversation.
Oh, okay.
I do.
Maybe I took the wrong thing
from
it.
I do.
You're like, what you got to do is file FOI requests.
But it's funny because it sounds like exactly what the fuck I would say.
Yeah.
The cops view reporters as stiffs. They do that, or they're out to get them kind of thing. And then for me, my father was a cop, my uncle was a cop, so like I relate to that a lot easier than a lot of reporters do.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, just being like, this is bullshit over this, and then they're like, hey, this guy's all right, and then
right.
you start forming relationships. But it's all about being treated fairly too. But a lot of the good cops just want to be treated fairly, and sometimes
and I get that, but it's always like, how do you prove that in a matter of 2 minutes? During your elevator pitch type of thing when you first meet them, it's like before they've seen you do any work. I mean, and sometimes it helps if they have seen your other work, because then they know.
Correct. If you've been around a while and you're a known entity, it's a lot easier. That's the payoff of being in a market for a little bit. Yeah,
it is. Yeah. Okay. What purchase of $100 or less has most positively impacted your life in the last 6 months or in recent memory?
AirPods. But that's not less than $100 though.
Yeah, those are like 169-ish, but
yeah,
and the new ones are like 240.
I'm not going the new ones.
I have a pair of AirPods. I resisted for the longest time, and then a friend convinced me, and they actually are really good. It's like,
I know the same exact story. I was like, now they're gonna fall out because I was struggling with it. I was struggling with like with Bluetooth for a long time. I bought the Bose ones, and they were too heavy and they'd fall out. Then I bought the Jaybird ones, and they were uncomfortable. And my buddy at work's like, you just do the AirPods. I'm like, no, they're gonna fall out. I could just see I'm gonna lose them, and they're amazing. They're absolutely great.
One of the best parts is like the Bluetooth connection is really strong and really easy. Like that was my big hang up with Bluetooth shit, was that it never connected right, and it disconnected, and the battery died, and they actually just work, which is nice. But the thing that made me upset was when I read the Washington Post or Wall Street Journal article about how they're going to die. They're going to die within 36 to 38 months, depending on usage. And you cannot replace the battery. There's no way to replace it. So they just die. And you can go to the Apple. What's that?
I ran mine through the washer on accident once. They're still fine.
They lived. Well, that's good. I mean, they're tough little guys, but apparently they don't last forever. They're like us. And there's no way to replace. So you have to take them to the Apple store and then you say this like special thing, like you actually have to like phrase it correctly, and then they'll offer you new ones for like $49 per bud, I think. So they're like, it's like $100 to buy new one. But I mean, so basically they last 3 years, which was pretty disappointing to me. But yeah, they might even be worth it though, because they're that good. So
3 years for $169.
Yeah, might be worth it. It's almost like you're renting them. It's fine if you just view it that way. All right. Well, we'll let you go with a purchase of $169 or whatever they cost.
Okay.
Here's the next question. And I'm pulling out some different ones for you since you studied. How has a failure or an apparent failure set you up for later success? And remember, these are rapid fire, so try to keep it short. So, for example, do you have like a quote favorite failure of yours, like a time you failed that it at the time was horrible, but looking back on it, it really set you up for later?
Yeah,
success?
I mean, like that specifically, no, but just like knowing that you fucked up a story and knowing that you'll never do that again. And that's basically it. Waking up in a panic and going, shit, I think I got that wrong, and you'll never do it again.
Yeah.
It's or effing up a relationship with a source or anything like that. I mean, thankfully that hasn't been a problem, but like, I'm especially with big pieces that are dropping, like the week that they drop, I'm like crazy. I'm like, I cannot, my wife doesn't even like to be around me, and I'm like, I got to get this right. It's gotta be great, but
yeah,
just that kind of stuff that forces attention to detail, because I think most of our job is attention to detail.
Yeah. If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere, we'll just say in the middle of Baltimore and also one in the middle of DC with anything on it, metaphorically speaking, getting a message out to millions or billions of people, what would it say and why? And it could just be a few words, or it could be a paragraph. It could be someone else's quote, a photo, anything. I mean, it could just be an advertisement for your book if you want.
It could. Fine, but let's pass that one. I don't really know.
All right. What is one of the best or most worthwhile investments you've ever made? And it could be an investment of money, time, energy, etc.
I would honestly say the investment in myself, the investment in trying to make this book happen, and the investment in forcing myself to believe in myself, which was a big part of the process.
Yeah, that's probably easy answer after hearing all that. What is an unusual habit or an absurd thing that you love?
That's vague, Bo.
It is.
Give me an example.
Well, I'm giving you, a lot of operating room.
these are really tough, man.
Like an unusual habit I used to have is that I used to, back when I ate a little more unhealthy, I used to like to dip my fries from Wendy's into the Frosty treat, the Frosty ice cream. That was a big habit, an unusual habit that I had. I don't know. An absurd thing that I love is collecting basketball shoes that I then don't wear. So I don't know. We don't want to get that personal here. Let's keep it more generic. All right. In the last, we'll skip that one. We'll come back to it. In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
Habit would probably be meal prepping on Sundays, which is boring, I know, but like,
okay. I like that. I like stuff like that. How long does it take you usually? Like in 2 hours?
We will spend like upwards of like 3 hours just cooking our asses off on a Sunday. And then my wife and I both have like crazy careers, so it's like, so we put them in the fridge, and it's grab and go all week, which saves so much time during the week. It's incredible. Awesome. And you're eating a lot healthier too.
Yeah, you put it in like little plastic containers and stuff, and
right.
What's your favorite or go-to meal to prep? Like chicken and broccoli, or with a little bit of rice, or what?
Yeah, it's basically just steamed vegetables. Like I'll grill a bunch of stuff on the grill, and then chop them all up, and then chicken, usually chicken or some steak. That I'll just as the protein. Yeah. Pretty boring. I mean, the weekends we go out to eat, because my wife's a foodie, but like usually it's just 5 days a week. It's that just meal prep stuff.
Sure. What advice would you give to a smart, driven college student who's about to enter the real world? So to
The
speak.
real world or our business?
We'll just keep it generic. The real world, quote in quotes, the real world.
I would say pay deference to people that are more experienced and older than you. That quality is not as well respected as I would hope it would be in some of the in some of the younger folks. But and then read a lot and always seek perspective, because I think now we have the opportunity to put ourselves in our own bubbles and just hear our own echoes. And I think a lot of people don't spend a lot of time seeking perspective. And I think it's crucial.
Yeah. When you personally feel overwhelmed or like you're lacking focus, what do you do to try to regain focus or calm down?
Drink.
All right. Well, it did help you write the book. So it did help you write the book.
Just like honestly, a dark room where you're just like, and a glass of whiskey and just kind of let your mind go, or a long run. I'll say that too.
What was the second?
A really long run.
Oh, long run.
Rolling rock. Long run on a hot day.
I thought I heard you say whiskey or a rolling rock. I was like, okay.
No. Like just a whiskey by yourself and let your mind go, or a long run on a hot day. A long run on a hot day goes a long way with me. Like my mind can take the trash out, and I come back a much better place. Yeah.
All right. Super fast answers here as we wrap up. What besides watching The Wire for the 9th time, what TV show are you streaming right now?
Atypical. I started on Netflix, which I think is a cool show.
That's like the kid who has special needs.
Yeah, they just dropped a new series, new
season.
And then we're watching Unbelievable right now too, which so far has been very, very good.
Cool. Do you listen to podcasts generally? Yes or no?
Not as much as most people do that I hear about, but yes, I do listen.
Okay. This is the fill in the blank question. So Bo is the blank of journalism. I like to say Bo is the Jason Bourne of journalism, is kind of what I would like to be, or how I would like to see myself. Brian is the blank of journalism, sort of like a fictional alter ego.
That's a tough one, man. Skip. I don't know what to say there.
Yeah, you can just pass it. Who's your favorite stand-up comedian?
Bill Burr.
Oh, he's good.
Right now, Bill Burr. Oh, he's my spirit animal. I love him.
Paper Tiger is his latest, right?
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah. Best movie about journalism.
Or Louis Black. I'll say Louis Black too.
Okay. Best movie about journalism of all time.
I have to go, and it's going to be very classic here, but I'm going to have to go All the President's Men on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe Broadcast News.
Get that a lot on the pod.
Broadcast News is good too, though. Like 80s, like Broadcast News is pretty legit as well. It's kind of, they serve two different purposes, but those two I think are my best.
Do you see yourself staying as a on-air TV reporter the rest of your life?
I don't know. Maybe.
Depends on how the
industry is changing rapidly, so we'll see see what happens.
Yeah.
But I have no plans on anything soon.
Yeah. Rap music or country music?
Neither. If you're gonna make me pick, I would go rap. I detest country music. I will run away from it.
Run away from it. Jazz or blues?
Definitely blues. Yeah.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Stick mic or lavalier mic?
Oh, nice. That's a nice little twist. That's going to depend, but I usually will ask for a lot.
All right, Brian Kuebler of WMAR in Baltimore, author.
There's one more question you didn't ask that I was hoping to get.
Okay, which one was that?
All right. I was like, which one would be the most in your reporter bag? Which one is the most?
Oh yeah, okay,
shocking thing people would carry.
What is something that you bring to work with you just about every day that you view as indispensable, but everyone else would think is kind of weird or surprising?
A reporter's pad with a pen.
Reporter pad with a pen. There you go. A little bit old school.
A very old school, and a plastic bag in my bag in order to put my notes into the clear plastic bag so I can read them while it's raining and nothing gets all crazy. That was a trick I learned back in the beginning of my career. But I'm still old school with that stuff because I see reporters on the phone all the time and reading off their phone and taking notes. To me, it's got to be, I have to write it down, and I like to write my scripts out, and I like to read my BOSATs and all that kind of stuff from an actual pad and paper because it's in front of me. Those are my words. I wrote them. And no one's going to call in the middle of my live shot and blow out my script to where I'm stumbling and bubbling and losing my space. Because that's happened to a bunch of colleagues that I know. And I'm like, nope, I'm going pad and pen.
That has happened to me.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
right?
I go back and forth. I try to bring pad and pen for all of the reasons you said, but I just sometimes neglect to do so. So I end up as one of the cell phone people who I kind of despise that look, but it is what it is. Well, I've actually heard people say that you should use a waterproof pencil, like a camping pencil or whatnot.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I haven't read that, but I'd like to look into that too.
Which is like pretty hardcore, but I guess you just go to REI and buy like 10 of them and keep them in your drawer and your bag, and there you go. And then you might not even need the plastic bag. But yeah, I love the plastic bag trick. That's smart. I've never heard of that, to be honest with you. Well, this has been fun, Brian. This has been awesome to catch up and hear about everything that you're doing and your monk-like whiskey discipline over the course of 6 years to write your book. So Brian's book, once again, is called The Long Blink. It's available on Amazon, through Barnes & Noble, which does still exist, and several other places that sell books. So look for it on store shelves or on the internet shelves, and go out and read Brian's book. Very exciting project, and sounds like a worthwhile one, and one that might change people's lives or perspectives. So, hey, thanks for making the time to come on the podcast. And real quick, now that you've been forced and coerced into creating social media accounts, if people do want to look you up, where can they find you? What are your handles?
On Twitter and on Instagram, I am at Brian Kuebler, BrianKueBLDR _ because some other guy has my full name and doesn't use the social media accounts, and it annoys me.
So the underscore comes at the end of both names?
Yeah, so you're typing in my name, and when you're typing in my name, I'm the one that pops up, but my actual handle has an underscore in the end, which I can't stand. Yeah. And on Facebook, it's at author Brian Kuebler. And then I have a website called brian-kuebler.com, which has all the book information, where to buy it, backstory, my bio, media, all that kind of stuff.
Sounds good. All right, we got it all. Okay, Brian, have a good night. Good talking with you.
You too, man. Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Bo.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Reporter Podcast with Bo Berman. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts.